Correct. Yeah, Jim Nance is still calling will still be calling the Masters.
Okay, that was good.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, folks, and hope you're doing well on a Friday. Welcome to another episode of the Double A Team Podcast. Sorry, a little bit. We went on air a little bit early to talk about some corrections, but nonetheless, I am your host, Stephen Nagishi, along with my co-host, Ken Fang from the Awful Announcing. Ken, thanks for joining me once again.
Yeah, good to be on with you, Stephen. I'm was just checking something, and so I didn't realize you were going on live, but that's okay. Good to be on with you.
Yeah. I also want to send a special shout out to your boss, the owner and the editor of Awful Announcing, Ben Koo, excuse me. Ben was gracious enough to join me yesterday, and if you haven't checked out the show yesterday, a lot of things that we're going to be talking about, stuff that we might have already touched on, specifically topics that we're going to be discussing. Might overlap with what Ken's boss Ben Koo had said, but we're going to try and differentiate it and also offer our own opinions on the other matters, in addition to the big news that happened came out yesterday, of course. And all right, Ken, let's get to the big first topic story. Let's start with the news of NCAA Tournament Review, and both men and women, and it came to a conclusion Sunday with the women's. South Carolina beating Iowa, and then the day after men's tournament, UConn has became a repeated champion, beating Purdue. So let's start with the Sunday's game. Obviously, the women's tournament. Women's game has come a long way, without a doubt. Mm-hmm. In spite of the the substandard treatments and we remember not too long ago about a tweet of I forgot the player or the school, but it was a substandard weight room and all that kind of stuff. But the women's game has certainly grown thanks to Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and also infamous Kim Mulkey bringing the attention as well to a degree. And I think a lot of people are starting to catch on with the women's basketball game and its popularity. Even the guys, calling men's, Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, and the guys over at TNT, they were more interested in the women's game, which kind of speaks volume of the growth and what could hopefully be a continuous growth, of the women's game, even with the expected loss of Clark and Angel Reese, both going to WNBA in a not too distant future, Ken.
Well, I think the women's game is in very good shape, Stephen. Especially women's basketball, the college basketball. You know that there's going to be a lot of interest in the WNBA. The schedule for the WNBA this season came out, and the Indiana Fever, who are expected to take Caitlin Clark first in next week's WNBA draft next Monday, which will be on ESPN, they're going to be on 36 times on national television. That includes ESPN, ABC, CBS, Amazon, and ION. Those are the 5 television partners,
right?
Partners for the WNBA, and it bodes well for the WNBA as well. You also have, as you mentioned, Angel Reese. You also have Cameron Brink from Stanford, who's coming out. You have a lot of players coming out, Stephen. So this bodes well. But also in college basketball, you have Juju Watkins,
right?
Big Ten with the USC. You also have Paige Beckers coming back for UConn. And you also have some South Carolina all coming back.
Right.
You also have Tehani Papau, who was a great shooter for South Carolina. Great to watch her. And
Claude J. Johnson from LSU as well, Reese's teammate, who got a very good deal on NIL that was posted on social media today.
yes. So you're going to see a lot of great women's players in college and in the pros over the next few years. And also this bodes well for the Olympics too, Stephen. While Caitlin Clark may not make this year's Olympic team, and that's how good the women's team is, Stephen. Caitlin Clark will make the women's team in the Olympics. The fact is that this is going to be great for international basketball for the women's side. You have Cardoso, who is Brazilian. Camila Cardoso, who won the national championship with South Carolina. She's from Brazil, so expect her to play for Brazil in the Olympics this year. So I think it's going to be great. And the women's game is absolutely fantastic. 18.7 million people watched the game, and it was more than the men's game. Now, granted, a couple things here, a couple caveats. The not quite on even keel here, even playing field, because the men's championship was on TBS, True TV, and TNT, and also played at 9:20 at night on a Monday. The Sunday afternoon game for the women's championship was played on 3 o'clock on ABC. So obviously more viewers are going to go to that. But even so, Steven, even if the game was on CBS, you probably would have gotten around the 14 million that the NCAA tournament got on TBS this year, because they had about the same amount of viewers last year on CBS when UConn won. So I don't think really, to be honest with you, there would have been much difference. But I'll say this: the women's game is in great shape, Stephen, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to watching it for many years to come. I've been a fan of the women's game for a long time. I'm glad it's finally getting the due it deserves, and I just think that the fact is that we're going to see the rise of the women's game. I mean, you've seen it with the men already, and you see how excited people are when they see the NBA players come around and play, whether it's in Asia or whether you see them play. The NBA is such a big hotbed. Like China is a very big fans of the NBA. Taiwan, Japan, Vietnam, all big fans of the NBA, especially also in Europe too. We're going to see a big explosion for women's basketball all around the world. And I think Caitlin Clark is going to be right there with it. Angel Reese will be there too. Camila Cardoso is going to be getting a lot of fans in Brazil. So I think that this is going to be a lot of fun. And the women's game the future is really, really bright, Stephen.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned here, both the NCAA and the media rights partners, they must do a much better job moving forward to enhance the game itself, as well as I mentioned earlier, the access to a better facilities and better treatment of the players, whether it's the press conferences, post games, etc., that is still somewhat lacking and leaves a lot to be desired. So hopefully, it's time that the NCAA takes the women's game, more seriously and make it a more presentable moving forward.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say this: the NCAA new contract, which begins next year with ESPN, really undervalued the women's tournament. They're going to get $65 million a year, whereas the men get almost 10 times that, to be honest with you, from CBS and Discovery through the TNT Sports. So I'll tell you this much: there's no excuse for the NCAA really treating the women's tournament so poorly. They really should have, instead of bundling it with the entire NCAA contract with the other championships, and I understand what the NCAA's thinking was, but they should have gotten more money. And $65 million a year for a tournament that is going to be expanding. If I'm the NCAA, I try to rip up that contract and try to get a better deal with ESPN. I know that's not going to happen. I know ESPN feels they have a bargain in what they have, and they're not going to turn down paying a lesser amount of money than what the NCAA could have gotten for the women's tournament. But the women's tournament is showing that And I think, yeah, will there going to be next year? There's going to be a little bit of a drop off. Yes, probably, but not that much. So I don't want to hear that from misogynists saying, "Oh, this is a one-time thing," or Caitlin Clark's 15 minutes of fame are up. They're not. They're going to continue. And if you don't like it, just get out of the way and move on and shut up.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there, Ken. A lot of the the women's coverage in the game itself has been dominated with the misogyny and fueled by racism, unfortunately. The last couple of years, and the last year with Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese, and the issues involving Kim Mulkey, and this year also involving South Carolina and their head coach Don Staley. Being asked about the transgender athletes' rights to play in the women's game, and she emphatically, shut down a loser reporter from Outkick, basically once the answer, she answered at the, the Outkick reporter. I forgot his name. Yeah, I hope he enjoyed his 15 minutes of fame or whatever the hell he was looking for. But it's just that it was a collection of just sickening things that we've been seeing the last couple of years, and hopefully we don't have to no longer see that. And then if there are people who are continuing to gaslight women's game into some sort of a racial epiphany, black versus white or whatever, then I hope that those people, deserve to be called out and, get their press, passes revoked or just get called out and, and so forth. So we're going to move on here to the men's game. We saw UConn, Dan Hurley and the UConn Huskies repeated as a national champions by beating Purdue. You live in that neck of the woods, Ken, obviously up in New England, Northeast area. UConn obviously is the big game in town in that region to a degree, maybe only surpassed by the Patriots, and then the Boston Red Sox and Celtics and so forth, basically because that's the only professional sports teams in that area, and then the whole region probably watch it through NESN. Back in the day, there used to be a hockey team, Hartford Whalers, which ended up leaving Hartford to go to Carolina and became.
I have my own opinions about the Hartford Whalers and what a joke guys they are, but I don't want to get into. I don't want to get the people of Hartford angry because I've gotten to many fights about the Whalers and George and their ridiculous owner Carmanos and how you're getting me. You're getting me. Just continue, Stephen. I don't want to.
No. I'm just saying that UConn obviously is the only game in town. They are probably right up there in pars in terms of its popularity. May not be there, with the Patriots and their dynasty years and all so forth. But UConn brand in basketball, both men and women. Women, by the way, did get to the national semis before they were ousted by Caitlin Clark in Iowa. Right. So, both men and women. It's kind of a rarity that both programs are so represented strong, for many, many years. Gino Auriemma still there, and now Dan Hurley, and well before that, Kevin Ollie, and then of course Jim Calhoun. He started the tradition and everything and so forth that has been carried on. So, what are your thoughts on the game and the UConn as they repeated?
Well, having lived in Connecticut when the whole thing started, when UConn began its run, and it really began with winning the NIT in the 1980s, and then they started going into the NCAA tournament, and Jim Calhoun just built a great program, and then he left. Of course, you mentioned Kevin Ollie, and then winning eventually. This is their sixth championship, Stephen, and there's no doubt that this is a team that is one of the. They always argue who are the blue bloods in college basketball. You have to say UConn is one of them. It's the more recent. Are they like UCLA, Kentucky, the old tradition, the old guard? No, but they're the new guard, and you have. There's no doubt of the great accomplishment of what they've done in stores. Dan Hurley has brought back the luster to the and the glory to the UConn to the UConn program. I like to claim him a little bit as our own. I went to the URI to the University of Rhode Island. He coached a couple of years there, and he brought us some good stuff. And he went as far as he could go with the URI Rams. But a great hire by UConn. And you remember in 2020 when they had a really bad loss to Villanova, he said, "Get us now. This is the time to get us. Get us now because we're coming." And he was absolutely right. And now he's looked at the program that he's done and using NIL, getting different players. He is just one of those guys, Stephen, that has figured it out in this era of NIL and paying players and the transfer portal. He knows how to get the right players and a totally different team. He lost a lot of his players from the year before that went to the NBA. But now here he comes back and he's got he was reloaded. And I don't really put it past him to win a third national championship next year, Stephen, because that's how good a coach he is. And yes, and speaking about the Connecticut, they are a basketball crazy state. It was the women before under Gino Auriemma and that dynasty that they had. And now it's back to the men. I can remember even before UConn and its prominence, they had a great rivalry with the University of Rhode Island in the old ECAC before Dave Gavitt came in and ruined everything and bringing in the Big East and excluding the University of Rhode Island and only bringing in Providence and Syracuse and Georgetown and Boston College, UConn, Syracuse, and then eventually building around it by raiding the Atlantic 10, eventually with Temple and West Virginia, and then trying to hold it together with football. But anyway, this is a conference that has to be considered one of the best in college basketball. Villanova has won the 2 championships over the last 6 years, along with UConn. It's a great program, Stephen. It's a program that really has to be dealt with. And while Kentucky tried to get Dan Hurley after John Calipari left, I don't think that happened. I think Hurley likes where he is. He likes the Northeast, and his wife has already said that they're not going to go to Kentucky. And Dan Hurley's wife is pretty much the boss of that. Knowing that family, she is the boss, and what says goes. And they're not going to Kentucky. They're going to stay in Connecticut for a very long time.
Yeah, it will be interesting the job Hurley will be able to do. You know, their talented big man Donovan Clingan officially announced today that he is heading to the NBA draft, and he should be a very, very high pick anyway, probably top 5, top 4, without a doubt. Unfortunately, this year's draft, as some experts have called it, probably the worst they have seen ever. So it will be very interesting to see how good of a player Clingan is and how high he will be drafted. And of course, you're going to have to deal with the NILs and the transfer portals, etc., which I'm sure they're going to lose a few players, but at the same time, they're more than likely going to get more game players from their championship pedigree as well. So it will be an interesting time for UConn. Purdue finally, after years and years of being ousted in the first rounds and not making it far, they finally broke through and relied on Zach Edey for what was his final college game to get to where to get to the championship. And unfortunately, UConn just was too good.
Yeah,
the shooting was UConn was just superb, while Purdue just struggled. Edey was struggling down the stretch as well, being hounded defensively. I think it was kind of ridiculous that Draymond Green, the typical blowhard that he is on and off the court, accusing Edey of quitting on the team, in the game in the second half. which is dumbfounded and uncalled for. But, it was a very tough game for Purdue. There's no question about it. Edie's leaving, of course, after this year, having won another National Player of the Year award for the second consecutive time, if I'm not mistaken. So Purdue is, obviously Edie's legacy is secured, and it's going to be very, very interesting for Purdue, with UCLA, USC entering the conference next year. The recruiting is going to be fierce for every team in the Big Ten, and obviously there's going to be a little more traveling out to the West Coast as well. So
it's going to be crazy.
It's going to be crazy. So I look forward to the how Purdue bounces back after they finally broke through on Zach Edey's final year in NCAA, and who is going to be the player that they will emerge in West Lafayette to carry the legacy of Zach Edey and the Purdue Boilermakers from this year. All right, Ken, go ahead.
I think with Purdue, they have a great coach in Matt Painter. He can reload. The whole interesting thing is that you've got 4 new schools coming in next season with Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA. They're going to be bringing in some interesting...
Oh, that's right. Yes, I forgot Washington and Oregon too.
Yeah, they're going to be coming in next year, Stephen. It's going to be a lot more travel, especially for Rutgers and Maryland going coast to coast. I'm going to be interested in interesting to see the adjustment of USC and UCLA, Stephen, and seeing those schools, the traditional Midwest Big Ten schools going out there as well. It's going to be fun to watch, but it's also going to be to see how this affects players who have basically been used to be playing either in the Eastern or Central time zone. Now they're going to have to be playing out West. How they're going to handle that schedule, it's going to be very interesting. I know they tried to balance it out with with football. We're going to have to wait to see how they handle it in basketball and how many conference games they're going to have and where they're going to hold that. I think next year, I believe they're still going to have the tournament in. I have to see where they're going to hold. They held it in Minneapolis this year, which was a very great venue. I'd like to see them go to Las Vegas, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to put a bow on the NCAA tournament for this year. An outstanding year, and look forward to the how the championships will unfold next year as the college basketball season officially comes to an end in both men and women. All right, now let's move on to the next topic. Shocking news came out yesterday. OJ Simpson died of a prostate cancer. He was 76. First of all, I didn't know he had a cancer, to be honest with you. And, it was like literally first thing in the morning that popped out on Twitter. And I thought it was some sort of a joke, but I had to wait a couple of people to, officially verify it as the official death of OJ Simpson. And, your boss, Ben Koo, and I had a lot of conversations, and certainly Ben, just unfortunately wasn't old enough to remember, the OJ playing, as well as the whole trial and everything that was taking, that was captivating America at the time. So, and I was also living in Japan at the time, and where, we didn't get as much coverage, although it was somewhat in the news, if I recall back then at the time, 30 years ago. So, Ken, I want to ask you your thoughts on the death of OJ and the complicated legacy that he left on and off the field. More off the field, I would add.
Yeah, I mean, here's a guy who did his best to be so non-controversial up until what happened with Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. He was, very advertiser friendly. Remember the advertisement with Hertz flying through airports, running through airports in the 1970s and 1980s. His attempts to be a broadcaster, whether it was be at ABC on Monday Night Football after the Howard Cosell era. NBC used him. Bob Costas talked about that yesterday, especially on a lot of talk shows that he was on, whether it was NBC or CNN yesterday, Stephen. But let me say this about OJ Simpson, and I'll never forget that era because I was working in radio. I was in Rhode Island, but also paying a lot of attention to that trial, the murder trial. It was on every day on CNN. There were reenactments on E. It was so crazy. People like Judge Lance Ito,
Yeah.
Marshall Clark, Johnny Cochran, of course, Robert Kardashian, who of course led to the whole thing with the Kardashians, who we see now. But though they became household names because they were on every day. And OJ Simpson, as you mentioned, had a very complicated legacy, as you put down there, Stephen, and a very good point by you. As I mentioned, up until before the murders, corporate friendly, never really embraced by the Black community. He always had white girlfriends. He had a white wife in Nicole Brown Simpson, and he never really embraced the Black community. It was only until during the trial when he tried to appeal to them, and of course they did embrace him because they did cheer the verdict when it came out that he was not guilty of murdering Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. He, of course, never was embraced by anybody again, especially by advertisers, especially when he, when he was free. He said he was always going to look for the real killer. I don't think he ever did. He went to jail for a robbery. He was also ruled in a civil trial. He was ruled against and found to have killed his ex-wife and Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. And as you mentioned, we never knew that he had cancer, but it's kind of interesting the reaction to his death. I'm a guy that as a kid grew up, idolizing OJ Simpson because of his prowess on the field as a running back for the Buffalo Bills, and doing great stuff. And I thought he was going to be an excellent announcer. He never really panned out as one, but and of course he was in the Naked Gun movies as Detective Norberg. So and you kind of laugh about the things he did as he tried to be an actor, but it's tough to really say anything, to me at least, good about OJ Simpson, especially especially after the 1990s and the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman and the treatment of women. I never really liked that. It's one of those situations, Stephen, where you think about, and I think he also tried to do Cameo. I think he also tried to be on Cameo and give out greetings. And I'm probably he got some money from that. But there's a guy who I really don't have many good things to say about. I don't think not too many people do. I know some people still in the Black community still feel that he got the right verdict, but again, that's the Black community, and I don't begrudge him for that because of some of the things they've gone through. But and Stephen A. Smith has said that if he were on the jury, he would OJ Simpson would have gone to jail. So let's just put it this way. He's buried. He's going to be buried soon. He's going to be in the ground, and I think that's basically where I'm going to leave it.
Yeah, he leaves a very complicated legacy as well. On the field, he was a terrific running back, one of the leading rushers in the history of the NFL, a Heisman Trophy winner. Unfortunately, he played for some really, really bad Buffalo teams at the time. He really never got his dues in terms of becoming like a Super Bowl champions and et cetera, et cetera. So, and off the field, he was like a marketing, magnet. Everybody wanted a piece of him. You mentioned Hertz. We all remember that old commercials and whatever else he did. Other than Hertz, he was very, very successful. He was idolized and worshipped. And it's always coming back to, what Charles Barkley always says famously about, worshiping athletes and stuff like that, which obviously he despises the idea and it never should be done. And I think from that point on, I think around the 90s, Ken, obviously I wasn't living in the country at the time, so maybe you can a little bit refer a lot better about maybe the change in the cultures, reality shows, the emergence of it, the rise of cable news, Nancy Grace, and stuff like that. What are your thoughts from that kind of, like a turning point in the American culture? Like the clickbait stuff that we're used to seeing, so frequently nowadays. Do you think that was kind of like the a precursor to where our country and our society is, or is that just a little bit overblown?
Well, it was the beginning of almost a celebrity culture, Stephen.
Yes.
It was also the beginning of wall-to-wall cable coverage of an event. I don't think CNN still learned from that. CNN saw ratings of basically televising the trial 8 hours a day, and the ratings went through the roof. And CNN, they gave rise to like you said, because it was on every day. They were getting great daytime ratings. It was getting ratings better than some of the daytime dramas on in the day, like All My Children, and of course General Hospital and Days of Our Lives. People were watching, and it was reality television. It really was. And you had, and as I mentioned, like a lot of those people, like Johnny Cochran and Marcia Clark, Judge Lance Ito, they all became celebrities in their own right. Some of them didn't want to. Of course, we haven't seen Lance Ito in a while. Marcia Clark tried to have her own show. Johnny Cochran used his fame for various other things. But it was just it was really interesting about that time. And if you weren't alive back then, or really weren't aware of it, or too young to remember, try and see some of the coverage on YouTube, because you can find clips of that. And I mean, as you mentioned, Nancy Grace was there doing nightly recaps for Court TV, which exists in a different incarnation. Court TV eventually became True TV, but we don't have to go into that. But it's interesting how it was at the time. Cameras in the courtroom were in their infancy at the time, and then everyone was just finding a way that because we could watch this trial, everyone was riveted, and it was a drama. It really was a drama. Whether it was testimony from various people like law enforcement, or whether it was Johnny Cochran or OJ Simpson attempting to put on those gloves, which had shrunk. So obviously, when he tried to put them on over plastic gloves that he was wearing on his hands, it wouldn't work. It didn't work as well. So, and I think that was a big visual, even despite all of the evidence that was shown to that pointed to OJ Simpson. So, it was quite the time, Stephen, and that was 9 months. The trial lasted 9 months. You're not going to get a trial like that now, but 9 months trial on every day. People basically analyzing it almost like the NFL pregame and postgame shows. Anchors, Jim Moret, who is now a reporter for Inside Edition, was on every day. He was a celebrity reporter for CNN. Because he was a lawyer, he was able to become the person to be the anchor for CNN. Larry King Live was on every night doing the programming. So there was a cottage industry around that entire trial, Stephen, and CNN tried to pick it up. Court TV as well. E was always on it, as I mentioned. So it was always people just couldn't get enough of it, and people were saying at the end of it, Was there something wrong with us? Maybe there was, but at the same time, it was an appetite because people wanted OJ Simpson was very well known. He was a celebrity, from his days of being an actor at that time and being an announcer. But yeah, it was a very interesting time to see what happened, and I would definitely suggest those of you who don't remember or were not young enough to look at some of try to see some of the coverage, especially. Um, and I'd be remiss if we didn't mention the white Bronco chase when Simpson was trying to avoid capture in the police, trying to avoid capture from the police, going down the
Cowlings too.
Yeah, Al Cowlings was driving. He was hunched down in the back seat with a gun to his head. AC calling up the police saying to back off, and then eventually they went home. And the coverage of that, basically from when it was discovered that discovery of the murdered bodies at the in Brentwood, all the way going to the final verdict, which was almost over a year, Stephen. It's just pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was a chaotic times, and one of these days I'm definitely going to try and look at the documentaries and 30 for 30 about OJ in America. That 1994 was why, because Houston, New York NBA finals was taking place. And then also the World Cup soccer was, I believe, in effect, the one in the USA in '94.
All happened at once. Yeah,
all happening on some similar timelines too. So, I think that's something I'm going to try and educate myself, and then maybe that was somewhat of a turning point about the the celebrity worshiping and then gossiping, and then the rise of reality televisions where people sell their personal lives or expose themselves for greater fortunes. Ironically, with the Jenners and the Simpsons all somewhat interconnected, and with the Kardashians and everything. So
yeah, I mean, I was, like I said, I was a reporter for radio at the time. Luckily I was in Rhode Island, not in Los Angeles, although keeping our radio station also was keeping abreast of the whole thing. And I'll never forget when it was announced that the verdict was that the jury reached a verdict. The day before it came out, Stephen, it was almost like a 12-hour wait for them to announce it, because I think it was like the day before they said they had a verdict. They said they would come out the following day, and everybody was just waiting outside the courthouse. And then when they announced not guilty, there was a big roar from the Black community outside the Los Angeles County Courthouse, happy that OJ Simpson was acquitted. And then you could see the divide on racial lines. The white community did not like that at all. So the Black community felt that this was finally, it's time to get one up on white people.
Right.
I don't begrudge them for feeling that way because of all the things that has happened, and it really has happened since. But I hate to say that was kind of like the wrong symbol to hang your hat on.
Yeah, absolutely. Even an African American man like OJ with his power and wealth and access, if you get the right representations, you could get away with murder, and
he literally did get away with murder.
Yeah, right. And then that was somewhat of a the irony in all of this, with the double standard in the the justice system in this country and so forth. Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to the next topic. This one we've been following for very closely, about Shohei Ohtani and his translator Ippei Mizuhara. He was officially indicted on bank fraud charges by federal authorities. He surrendered himself today, posted $25,000 in bond. So he's officially out as of today, Ken. And the numbers are just simply staggering about, the amount of money that he was stealing from Ohtani. This is like $16 million, mm-hmm. which is incredibly staggering. He did so by posing himself as Ohtani, and then having to transfer the money from Ohtani's account into his, and his degenerate gambling habit really was the downfall. He spent like $18 million, and then he also won only 14, and he was like over $4 million in losses. And it got so bad that there were some bookies reaching out to him and saying that they saw Ohtani walking his dog in Newport and stuff like that. That Ohtani was actually this close to getting his leg busted or just being attacked by the bookies. And we all know the bookies, legal or even mostly illegal ones. They were connected with the mob in some capacity. Yes. So it was it was a scary moment. And the thing that Ben and I discussed yesterday was the something you and I touched last month, of course, through awful announcing article about Bomani Jones saying that Ohtani could face lesser charges because because he is Asian, and that how the rest of the world, or the rest of us outside of AAPI, of course, white, African American, and Hispanics, view us, through kung fu movies and et cetera, which was very, very a head scratching one, even by his standards. So, Ken, what do you think about the latest news and the possible exoneration now for Ohtani moving forward?
Well, I felt this all along. I felt that Ohtani was not involved. His interpreter was pretty much involved all the way, even though this is not good enough for some people who are reporters who are still skeptical of all this. Let me just say this. The feds, when they have a case against you, and if they have a case against you, are going to be very thorough in their investigation. We saw it, especially in the Balco investigation. We saw it with Mary. I think it was Marion Jones, I believe it was, with her, when she got in trouble with Balco. We also saw it, especially in many other cases involving athletes. When the feds come after you, they have evidence, and they're not going to protect certain people. And people who say that the feds are protecting Ohtani are just totally off base here, because the feds are coming after, and when they're going to get everything, they're going to get to make their due diligence. And one thing they did was also get recordings of the interpreter of Mizuhara saying and posing as Ohtani. They got the recordings from the bank. They managed to subpoena this information. They got this as evidence. There's a reason. And I work for a financial institution now, Stephen. Everything is recorded. So there's no way that they're going to be able to get this evidence and say, oh, well, we're going to eschew this evidence, but we're going to keep this evidence. No, that's not what they do. They listen to everything. And there's a reason why those calls are recorded, to not only protect the financial institution, but in situations like this, they could be possibly used as evidence. So Mizuhara was not very smart in trying to pose as Shohei Ohtani, in talking and trying to get money, and also locking out his agents and other advisors from the account. And as you mentioned, it got pretty close to Ohtani's leg being busted. I would hate to think that what could have happened had that happened, and how long he could have been out, and how that could have ruined a great career. So it's really amazing how Mizuhara not only put himself in danger, but also put a person who could have been collateral damage in danger. So I don't think the investigation is over, even though they announced that Mizuhara is probably going to be the target of this investigation, and they announced that Ohtani was a victim of being bilked. I know that's not good enough for some people, but you know what? The feds make their due diligence, and they do it very well. And if you have your issue with the FBI, then I would hate to think, if they come after you, what would happen. So that's my feelings on that, Stephen.
Yeah, you summarized it very, very well. There are people out there who are still trying to hang on to the conspiracy that Ohtani was somewhat of a degenerate. I stopped following several people, deleted phones of a well-known journalist um, as a result of their tweet, because they're so desperate in trying to portray Ohtani as some sort of a degenerate gambler, because in spite of his wealth on and off the field, that he wants to make money, or he's looking for, cheap thrills of sorts, which is not the case. And yeah, you want to stick with the conspiracy theory that FBI covered it up because Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida happened to be in Washington visiting this week, and that they wanted to make sure that the national hero of Japan is officially cleared, and wanted to put it all on Ippei Mizuhara, something like that. Yeah, hey, go ahead. You want to stick by that stuff, hey, by all means, go ahead. And the amount of coverage certainly out there, there were a certain number of people, who said that the amount of people still wanting to claim something about Ohtani and the gambling connection, and that Ippei Mizuhara was the black sheep taking the fall or something like that. I'm sorry, Ohtani is the black sheep, and then Ippei Mizuhara was taking the blame and taking the fall on behalf of him. It's just simply stunning. And again, we called out on the Bomani's comments about how Asian people like Ohtani would probably get a leniency if there was any wrongful doing, which thankfully was not the case. And it would be hard for me to imagine somebody like Bomani or anybody else out there, right, with or without any law knowledge, or even understanding the federal investigation or knowledge of that kind of stuff, to openly admit that they were wrong, and that openly rooting for a downfall, or having another Pete Rose type incident really doesn't make any sense at all whatsoever, Ken.
No, it doesn't. And I've liked Bomani overall. I've been in the audience when he's made some great comments about journalism and reporting and writing. I happen to like him a lot, but he was way off base with his comments there. And again, I go back to the silly notion that Asians are the quote unquote model minority. There's no such thing as a model minority. And every minority in this country has struggled. Do not say because Asians tend to quote unquote make more money than other make money more money than other minorities in this country, that means that they are quote unquote a model. They're not. Okay. And lumping Japanese and Vietnamese and Taiwanese and Chinese all together as a quote unquote model minority just doesn't make sense. And this has been a myth, Stephen, and this is something you and I have been fighting for many years. And it just gets me angry over things, and it's getting me angry right now. But and the fact is, just to think, then using that, then saying, oh, because because Ohtani's Japanese, that means that he's going to get off, or he's going to be treated much more lenient. That's not the case. There's no such thing. So, and that's just a myth that's built into your head, and it's a myth that you feel that you want to perpetuate about the model minority. Which, again, Stephen, we have been fighting for going back to the 1960s. It's like 60 years, six or seven decades of this ridiculous argument, and there's ridiculous myth that has been perpetuated by not only just whites but other minorities who get jealous of Asians, and who are just trying to get who have their own
Anyway, own problems, yes, own racism. We understand. There's no question about that.
Yeah,
and that's something that why Ken and I originally started this show to call out the anti-Asian racism that really skyrocketed during the pandemic. and then we're not stupid, and then we're very aware of the plight of the racism faced by African Americans still to this date, and the Latinos and other LGBTQ minority groups. We're definitely on the corner for them, in spite of all the social unrest and the government trying to overturn some of the the rulings and the laws that prevents and protects us. So for somebody like Bomani with this type of cheap shot, and certainly others came up with a similar claims, are still clinging on to hope that Ohtani is some sort of a degenerate and then naive person. Now, is Ohtani maybe a little bit naive? Yeah, maybe so. And then also perhaps that Ohtani's inability to maybe speak English to some degree here in America, despite him being here for well over 6-7 years now. I think it's time, maybe Ohtani, maybe this lesson overall. I don't want Ohtani to be like some, shun people away. But, maybe this is a lesson learned for him about trusting people, maybe trusting too much to a degree. But this is obviously, his livelihood. Obviously he can now focus on baseball for now. But, when this issue officially won't go away until Mizuhara gets indicted and sent to jail, and perhaps maybe Ohtani will likely, face a series of questionings from the federal authorities down the road as well, depending on how it turns out. But whatever it is, wanting Ohtani to be like the next Pete Rose is simply stunningly stupid. Whether you're a fan of other teams or whether you're a media member, so. And we're definitely going to call out those people and highlight the ridiculousness in terms of how we, the Asian Americans, are being portrayed, as well as the Asian American athletes are being treated, not just in this country, but around the world as well. All right, Ken, let's do some couple of interesting news stories. The Oakland Athletics are leaving Oakland. This was something that has been in the works for a long time, but they're moving to a substandard minority, minor league AAA Sacramento stadium that is expected to hold about 10,000 people. Ben was pretty much worked up since he's from the Bay Area and always rooted the Oakland Athletics ever since he was little. And I gotta say, this John Fisher guy certainly ranks right up there with morally decrepit Donald Sterling. Maybe not as maybe David Tepper isn't as bad, but certainly approaching that level of incompetent owner who is trying to piss off fan base that has simply been royal for many decades. This in spite of losing Oakland Raiders to Las Vegas, and then Golden State Warriors leaving Oakland to go down to San Francisco. Your thoughts on the whole A's fiasco there?
It's horrible, Stephen. Here's a guy that never really bargained with Oakland in good faith about a new stadium. He was. You can pretty much tell he was not intent on staying there. He wanted to go to Las Vegas. He wanted to follow the Raiders to go to Vegas. And while Las Vegas opened its arms to a new hockey franchise in the Golden Knights, the Aces in the WNBA, and the Raiders, it's been lukewarm about the A's. And they pretty much can see a carpetbagger when they see one. John Fisher is a guy who not only is he going to bring them to Sacramento and play in a substandard stadium. During his press conference, he didn't even mention any of the A's. He just said, imagine Aaron.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Imagine Aaron Judge being, oh yeah, Aaron Judge. Oh sure, Aaron Judge is going to be there for the New York Yankees. Why don't you just mention everybody else in the major leagues? You could just tell he doesn't care, and all he just cares about is just going to Las Vegas and getting his payday, and maybe he'll sell the team then. But the Oakland A's have had a great tradition, and I know they left. They got the team from Kansas City when Charles Finley moved the team there from Kansas City, going to Oakland, and he pretty much treated Oakland pretty poorly itself, and the fans responded by not going to the Oakland Coliseum. But then after they got a better ownership through Levi's, they got a much better ownership that cared, that at least to the postseason every year. And yes, there was Moneyball, and yes, there was trying to spend a little bit less to do more with less. But they went to the postseason, and they continued to do well. And it was Oakland's team. It was not San Francisco's team. It was Oakland. And the fact that John Fisher's come in and ruined that by treating the fans poorly, by not even trying to upgrade Oakland Coliseum. I've been in that stadium. It was a pretty decent stadium, Stephen. But to be honest with you, John Fisher just doesn't care. He's left it to go to disrepair. There were jokes about the drainage in there. There's also been jokes about animals in the press box, raccoons and the like. And that goes to ownership. It goes to how John Fisher treats the team. He's not spent any money. The team is going to be doing very poorly. I don't think it's going to be in last place again in the American League West. And then when he goes to Las Vegas, he's going to all of a sudden get rapture and start spending money and I believe he's going to try and sell to a private equity. That's my prediction. He's probably going to try to sell to a private equity firm and get out when he sees that they can get maximum value when the team finally goes to Las Vegas. But the fact that Rob Manfred has been allowing this and not force John Fisher to sell the team to someone who cares and wants to have the team in Oakland, that just speaks volumes, Stephen. And it just goes to show you that Rob Manfred is not a very good commissioner, and he's allowing this to happen, and he's allowing the team to leave a very, very, very a fan base that has been very loyal to the A's for many years.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe the conspiracy theories are that Sacramento is eventually going to replace Las Vegas, because I know the mayor doesn't seem to be all that worked up or really interested in having them relocating to Vegas. So I think the next best thing would be moving to Sacramento, which will allow them to stay in California. But we all know that nobody really cares about Sacramento. I know Ken Rosenthal posted an article that was very, very scathing about the players wanting to take money from Sacramento, and probably not going to happen. If you look at the track record of the Sacramento Kings, and they're able to retain players, which hasn't been very, very good anyway, because it's such a small market and there's just really not much around it. So, if they're looking at Sacramento as a viable excuse, to kind of build a new stadium and keep them there, at least be closer to maybe for A's fans in Oakland and San Francisco Bay Area to continue to follow them, then that's understandable. But I have a hard time feeling that this is going to work out well for anyone, and that the baseball owners were quoted as saying we all look stupid and bad.
Yeah, they're not very happy with them. Yeah, they're not happy with them.
Yeah, of course. And and rightfully so, because they all look like 20 other owners are in cahoots with this as well. So, very, very interesting to see how this thing, where it's going to end, where's the landing point, and how it ends up. Now, speaking of relocation, there's another story. Phoenix Coyotes leaving for Salt Lake City. It's kind of wild. I know Phoenix voters shot down a stadium proposal about maybe last year, and they were working on a newer one. And then all of a sudden, yesterday there was a time post and that says that there's a group in Salt Lake City, which also happens to be the owner of the Utah Jazz, was ready to relocate the Phoenix Coyotes to Salt Lake City, and then the framework is already in place or something like that. So it's actually quite interesting. It seems as though American sports has been relocating quite a lot, which obviously does not sit well with the many fans. And probably if you're from outside the United States, it's just probably really, really baffling why it happens. But Ken, it's kind of weird that Salt Lake City all of a sudden it become a viable spot for Phoenix Coyotes, who before Phoenix of course was the Winnipeg Jets, and now they're moving again in 25 years span. What do you make of this rumor?
Well, I have to say that Phoenix wasn't a very good market to begin with. They do have their rabid fans, and I feel bad for them. But the Coyotes really did a bad job by trying to get this stadium built in an area with a lot of senior citizens who who live on fixed incomes, and they don't want to have their taxes raised. And that was a really, really bad idea for them to have. I think if I remember right, Stephen, they had about 4 or 5 questions on the ballot, and all of them had to pass, and all of them got shot down.
Yeah.
The Coyotes have since are playing in a college rink. I think in Arizona State, I believe.
That is correct.
And while it's not a bad atmosphere, it's really a bad look for the league. And the league, if the NHL has 2 schedules right now, one in Utah and the other in Arizona, in case this deal doesn't go through. I feel bad because this has put a whole franchise in flux. The Coyotes do have a history in Arizona. It's 25 years, believe it or not, Stephen. It's pretty amazing that they've been there that long. But the fact is, and it's not the fact that that they don't have the fan base. Actually, Arizona and Phoenix, and they've tried a lot of things. They've tried to play in Phoenix. They've tried to play in Glendale. Now they're playing in Tempe. It's not good for the fan base, and it's not good for a franchise that's trying to establish itself in the Southwest. It's just ownership again. It's incompetent ownership that's trying to do something that is just not there. And again, with that idea of trying to get an entertainment district in an area that just wasn't meant for it was a bad idea. And now whether it goes to Salt Lake City, which will probably embrace the team, and probably because if you remember, Salt Lake got the Jazz from New Orleans, and have ever since have pretty much embraced the Jazz as their own. I would think that they will probably do the same thing. It's not a big market, to be honest with you, so I don't know how they would get a TV contract or how that's going to work. It's going to have to be pretty rushed upon, just like they did with Script Sports this year after Bally Sports Arizona went by the wayside. So I don't know, Stephen. I feel again. There is a bit of a fan base for the Coyotes. They are loyal, but again, ownership, as we talked about with John Fisher, very just not good vision by them. And this is where we're left with a team that's again being very nomadic, not only in its state but probably going into another state in the Mountain Time Zone.
Yeah, it's wild. It seems as though NHL has had a lot of teams relocate in the past. Of course, all of them leaving, Canada to, USA. Minnesota left Dallas. Minnesota left for Dallas, of course. Quebec Nordiques left for Colorado to become the Colorado Avalanche. And as we were mentioned earlier, Hartford Whalers left to become Carolina Hurricanes. The Atlanta Thrashers left to go up north to become the Winnipeg Jets. The Winnipeg, there was a report that they were having a hard time selling tickets, and they were trying to drum up interest and talk to local, leaders, business-wise, to try and drum up interest. And, I don't know how big of a market Utah Salt Lake City is. I would assume it's not that big. They have MLS, certainly. They have Utah Jazz. Get the NBA. I'm sorry, get the NHL, move Phoenix to Salt Lake City, and hell, move Oakland A's to Salt Lake City. Might as well, just put all four major sports teams in that region and see how it turns out, And
it looks like they're going to get the Olympics too. They're going to get the Winter Olympics. I believe 2034 is where it is. And don't forget, they did the 2002 Olympics too. So it looks like they're going to get the Olympics in 2034, Stephen. So Salt Lake City, they're trying to build new sports. I don't see anything wrong with that. And if they get the NHL, and they're probably not going to get an NFL team. That's out of the question at this point. But it is the Salt Lake does have a good fan base there, and I think they could support a hockey team. And we'll just have to wait and see how this goes. I just don't know where this is headed, and we'll just have to wait and see.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to end this show on another note about my favorite sport, soccer. And unfortunately, there were some incidents that caught my attention that needed to be brought up. Ken, we talked about the the Mexico supporters' behavior at the excuse me, in the Nations League, CONCACAF Nations League final, where they were, as always, in the stands chanting race, homophobic slurs, like they've always been doing here, whenever, the Mexican national team plays here in America. Well, this incident happened involving the lower level youth team, where MLS Next Pros, the New York Red Bulls youth team, participate in the GA Cup, Generation Adidas Cup. And they pulled the entire team after their players were alleged in an extreme lack of action by MLS in related to racist incidents involving two of their players here. U17 defender Eric Tai was racially abused from Croatia's side. Hajduk Split. And then day earlier, Joshua Grant was allegedly racially abused by CF Monterrey player. CF Monterrey is of course from, Mexico, Liga MX, which is not a surprise. And then, just recently, in the same tournament, Ken, believe it or not, the Philadelphia Union and the Brazilian powerhouse Flamengo, another incident where after the game, this was the final tournament, I believe. Let me pull up this incident here. Both the Philadelphia Union and the Flamengo accused each other of racism, and just an embarrassing slur of stuff that MLS does not need any more negative coverage, but yet here we are. We're used to seeing older players in other leagues, in other countries, engaging in homophobic or racist chants. Of course, the fans are also heavily involved as well. But when you have under 17 teenagers getting involved in such a disgusting behavior, no matter who is at fault here, it's just an embarrassing look, a PR nightmare for the MLS, who is in charge of organizing this here. It was just, it's sad that, where the younger generation of players are engaging in such, activities. And, it's not a good look, because these things get out of control, and if they're not actually, where there's no proper action being taken, these players go unpunished, and then they can get away with it as they get older.
Absolutely. I mean, you know more about this than I do, Stephen, but it's a culture that is still pervasive, unfortunately, that we're seeing in Mexico, about especially with slurs, and also racism. It's terrible. I don't know. Mexico has to be punished somehow. And these teams have to be punished, especially on the youth side. It's just really, it's just not conducive to playing. And when FIFA continues to say, let's play together and let's not have racism, and yet still doesn't punish it, those things just ring hollow.
It is. It's unfortunate that MLS and the lack of leadership under Don Garbage, as I like to refer to as MLS Commissioner Don Garber, and the U.S. Soccer Federation President Cindy Compardo, and their lack of leadership when it comes to these matters. I know MLS released a statement saying that they're investigating, but investigating basically is just a generic term for we're going to pretend it looked like it's happening. So it's an unfortunate incident. With the World Cup in about 2 years. This year you have Copa America happening in this country with South American countries coming to the United States as a way to prepare for cities to prepare and deal with the rowdy fans and even the racist ones, unfortunately. So it's something that is that needs to be taken more seriously. I know there was an incident involving U.S. men's national team star Weston McKennie at against SS Lazio, which Lazio has known to be a club with history of racism. Their supporters are mostly right wingers. They have a long history of taunting racism and also targeting Jews and so forth. So soccer is a massive game, and it's got massive problems when it comes to racism. It's just not a good look for MLS, which certainly has had their own problems. As they enter their 29th year. Inter Miami was eliminated from the CONCACAF Cup competition, and in a very pathetic manner. And it's still that the MLS just can't seem to get their own way right, and now you have these types of bad PR on top of it. So I'm hoping that MLS takes these accusations very, very seriously, whether it was coming from Philadelphia Union or whether it was coming from Flamengo. Flamengo is blaming Philadelphia Union players' appearances. So it's an ugly he said, she said stuff that, typically, really gets you nowhere. But I just hope that these things aren't ignored and, swept under the rug in hopes that it will go away. Because it exists and it will not go away anytime soon, no matter who you bring on in these types of competitions, especially if you're bringing youth teams from overseas, like we saw with Croatia and Brazil moving forward, Ken.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, that's going to do it for this edition of the AA team. We'd like to thank you for watching. We see an increasing audience every week for our programming. And even though it's on a Friday night where many of you are out, we appreciate the 170 people who are on board with us today. So thank you very much for watching. Stephen and I are going to be doing Friday nights for the next few weeks, and then we'll have a different night for you. We'll announce that for you on our social media platforms on X/Twitter. Don't forget to keep an eye on us. We are live streaming on X, and we are also live streaming on YouTube on our YouTube channel through the AA team. So keep an eye out of when we're out. But we appreciate you finding us tonight on a Friday night, especially after you worked and you're looking forward to the weekend. So thank you very much for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be bringing in more guests next week to focus on the NFL draft as well. The next 2 weeks, the NFL draft, of course, is 2 weeks from yesterday. So in 2 weeks, there's going to be a wall-to-wall NFL draft coverage, pretty much. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and I'll be posting the guests on my Twitter handle to let you know who is coming. And then hopefully you'll be able to join us. Well, on behalf of Ken Fang, I am Stephen Negishi. Thank you for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the AA Team Podcast live stream. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.